Good morning. So it's my honor on behalf of the search committee and the board of trustees to introduce our first ministerial candidate to speak before the congregation. But I wanted to let you know that if you know someone who can't be here today and not able to hear the talk, we're going to have video and audio CDs, DVDs available for checking out or to come here to the center and listen. And on August 4th, I think that's a Sunday, after the service, we're going to be showing the videos and audio videos and be up here for questions and answers. But getting to the task at hand, I felt privileged because I was assigned to be the contact for Reverend Andy. And so throughout the process, I really got to know him as we communicated back and forth. But as the committee as a whole, and as Mary alluded to, we had 18 candidates, and we had this elaborate process to make sure that it was like a matrix of how we evaluated everyone, just to make sure that everyone has a fair shot and we have a very fair way of looking at everything. And the one thing that came through with Reverend Andy, or A8, is his passion and his heart and his enthusiasm, for the work, to be a 100% in the spirit, full-time minister. That's his work, that's his passion, that's his calling. And so we were very, very excited to have one of our top candidates be Reverend Andy. And so it's with my pleasure to introduce Reverend Andy Torkelson, who's currently the pastor of the Center for Spiritual Living in Paradise, California. He's ordained, and he's here to share his heart with you. Reverend Andy?
Before I leave town today, I'm going to go get a tattoo. This is A8. Put it in a discreet place. Charlie was kind of like my version of Secret Service, so anyway, or my babysitter, whatever. But I really appreciate what he did. He was really great to work with. And I want to tell you on behalf of any of you who maybe don't know this, but the committee who put this together were really wonderful, and they treated, I know I was treated with respect, and he talks about all the examination that went on, but it was always done respectfully. And also what really came through is how much they love all of you and love this center. They really love this center. And I want to say that first of all, I want to thank you all for being here today. And it's a real honor to be here. I feel very humbled and very privileged to be asked here. This is a center that I've admired for a very long time, for the foundation it was built upon and for what goes on here. And I'm a big fan of your ministers and the way that they, the space that they stand in CSL as a whole. And so it's a real privilege to be here today, so thank you very much. So, okay. I want to ask you if you're at all comfortable to close your eyes for just a moment. I want you to consider for a moment the word home. Whether that was an actual place that you remember, or a place aspired to, or imagined, or dreamed of. I want to ask you for a moment to think about what its meaning is, the meaning of home. A place to relax and truly be ourselves, to be completely accepted, a place of nurturing, where tears and laughter are allowed, where history is shared, where problems are worked out, where we are heard, where we are loved. Where shadows are held at bay, where we feel safe. I would invite you to slowly rejoin the room. I've been working with people for over 25 years, and I started out in juvenile corrections, and I've worked in drug rehab programs, and I've worked with people who have gone through an awful lot of things, an awful lot of darkness. And the thing that has always amazed me, there's a concept in metaphysics of the divine urge. And what this means is there is something that wells up within us, no matter what we've been through. That there is a hunger inside of us to reach into a place. I've seen this exhibited in two ways in particular. One of them is love. I can't tell you how many people that I've worked with over the last 25 plus years who have said to me, I never heard the words, I loved you. Or until recently, I hadn't heard I loved you. And I think that that's really interesting, because I would think that, okay, so we don't hear that thing, so what's that mean? But it's amazing to me that what it means is there is a yearning within us to hear, I love you. And the second one is around the concept of home. And I have worked with people who have grown up in places that I can't even imagine growing up. In unhealthy places, dysfunctional places, psychologically, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever you want to say. And there is an idea, I remember back when I worked in juvenile corrections and when I worked in parole programs, there's an idea, a guy would say to me, someday I want to make a home. I want to make a real home. I want to make a home for, with the person I love and for the people I love. And someday I will have a home. There's a yearning for I love you, and there's a yearning for home. That thing that is just dialed in. And what I've discovered over the years among most people is that if we haven't experienced it, we have some sort of a construct. We have a yearning. We think about it. We imagine it. We wonder about it. It calls to us and we call to it. We have an imagination. We pretend. We pretend to hear the words. We pretend to see and live in that place. That is absolutely amazing to me. And when I first got involved in metaphysics, the concept of love in the universe, because we tend to see God as an energy, as a force. We tend to see God as something creative as opposed to a person. And so, I always kind of wondered, well, how does love fit into this thing? And what's amazing to me is love fits into it because it's dialed into us, this yearning, this knowing something can be better. I can feel loved, I can have a home, I can have a place. And I know for me, when I was a young adult and I was involved in a marriage that was very unhealthy, and we created a very unhealthy home, and we brought 3 children into the world. I have 3 children who are now in their 30s, and we were in this place of dysfunction and unhealthiness. And there's nothing worse there's nothing worse in my opinion than being a parent of children that you love so much and to know that you're not quite doing right by them. And at some level I knew that. I knew I wasn't quite doing right by them. And it bothered me, and besides my own experience in that home, and I remember going to public places and I would look at families that looked to me like they were healthy and they were happy. And I would imagine what it was like to be in those homes. And I would wish to be in those homes. And I wished I could create that. And as years went by, I was able to move beyond that marriage and take my children into another situation, and we had kind of a do-over. We got to try and create a home that was filled with love and healthiness. It's interesting, though, my children, since they've become adults, there's times where we get together and we talk, and I find out from them, and again, they're all in their 30s today, I found out from them that they used to do the same thing. That when we were in public places, they would look at other people and say, I wonder what it's like to live with them. To stand in that place of imagining, to stand in that place of yearning, of wanting, that incredible desire. In metaphysics, we believe that desire is a real driving force. We believe that desire is a real gift from the infinite to be able to move us on to something greater and larger. Every great thing that's ever happened in this world, and there's been a lot of great things happen in this world, have started with the idea of desire. It wells up within us. And yeah, there can be great desires to build things like the Golden Gate Bridge or skyscrapers or whatever, but there's also the equally great desires of to have experience, create love, to have experience, create a home, to create a place where I belong. There's a book in the Old Testament called Nehemiah, and of the Bible, and this book is really a sweet book because there's this wonderful character named Nehemiah. And Nehemiah had the privilege when he was a young man of actually having a home that he loved very much, but then he was taken and he was enslaved. You know, that enslaving goes on, you know, the Old Testament is full of all kinds of fire and brimstone and darkness, and it's like watching a mafia movie, you know, in terms of all the ugly politics and killing each other and war and war and backstabbing and all that sort of thing. It's like watching a summer blockbuster movie with all the special effects. And so Nehemiah was taken from his country and put into servitude into another country, and he worked for a royal family. But the thing is that Nehemiah held within him that place, that desire, that love for home, that place where I belong, that place where I feel loved. And Nehemiah was a really good metaphysician. And what I mean by that is Nehemiah came from a place of optimism. He came from a place of possibility. And the book of Nehemiah talks about how wonderful it was to be around this person. In fact, it was so wonderful that the gentleman that he worked for in servitude, this royal somebody, loved him. The book says he came to love him like a brother. And Nehemiah was always cheerful, and he was upbeat, and he tried to do the best thing all the time. Well, one day, Nehemiah ran across a gentleman who was from his country and had just come from the country, kind of a refugee situation. And Nehemiah asked him, he says, how's everything back home? And the guy says, well, it's fallen in disarray, and the armies that come in and they burn stuff down, they destroyed the walls, they took away the gates, and they did all this horrible stuff. Again, this kind of Old Testament kind of stuff. And Nehemiah was just, oh my God, you're kidding me. And the construct he had in his mind of what home would be and everything was gone, and he felt himself incredibly sad. And so one day he went to work, and the gentleman he was working for noticed his demeanor and said, you know, you seem sad, you seem off, you seem like something's wrong. And Nehemiah shared with him, he said, well, he says, I hate to bother you with this, but my home has been destroyed, my home has been burned, and my home is under siege. And I would give anything if I could somehow be involved in fixing that. See, desire turns into intention. That's what we teach in metaphysics. Desire turns into intention. And what happens when we're really clear with our intention is this Spirit gives us everything we need. And this royal gentleman who had all kinds of power said, well, he said, you know, I really care about you. I love you, so I can give you some money. I can give you some people. I can give you transportation to go back and to fix this. And this is what happens in metaphysics. We have a desire, goes into intention, And then the law, the universe, begins to fill it all in. And so Nehemiah went back, and his intention was to do whatever it took to get his country up and going. And that's the important part in terms of metaphysics, whatever it took to be able to do the work. And I know firsthand, as someone who has been in a lot of places in my own life, has worked with a lot of people who have been in interesting places in their life, just as I know a lot of you have been there. All the prayer, all the meditation, everything is great, but at some point we have to do the work. And Nehemiah wanted desperately to step into that place of having the privilege of doing the work, having the privilege of turning something around. So the Bible says he goes into the country, and there's all kinds of squabbling going on, there's all kinds of problems, there's all kinds of carnage, there's all kinds of damage. And Nehemiah steps into that place, and he starts doing the work, and he gets people to do the work. And because he's an optimistic guy, he inspires people, he brings enemies together, he has meetings with people, and they begin to actually turn it around. It talks about how they begin to replace gates, they begin to replace walls, they begin to rebuild the city of his land, and things are taking shape. But there are people who are cynical, and there are people who, who do you think you are, and why do you even take on this project? And there are people who are addicted to things like the chaos and the drama. And that's true of our own lives. There are people who come forward, and when we say, there's something we want to do, they are the naysayers. And those people were always there, and they were always trying to sidetrack Nehemiah. And in the Old Testament sense, there was the idea of, they were trying to start battles with him and start wars with him and trying to backstab him and politic him and all that kind of stuff. And Nehemiah basically came from a place that, if it were translated into what we would say today, he said, I can't stop my work because what I'm doing is too important. And there's one particular part of the story that I love, because Nehemiah is physically up on a wall. And I love this because he is physically up. He's taken himself to that higher vantage point. And there's a couple of naysayers down below. So, can we take you to lunch? Can you come down? Can you come down from the wall? And basically he says, no, my work is too important. My work is too important. My desire, my intention got here, but now it's time to turn this thing around. Now it's time to step into a place of building the home. Jackkornfield, the Buddhist writer, in his book, A Life with Heart, or A Path with Heart, I think it's called, he tells a story of sometime around the time of the Vietnam War, towards the end of the Vietnam War. He was a young Buddhist monk, and he was doing work with Cambodian refugees. And what we know about the Vietnam War is that when it was over, there was all kinds of refugee situations, and the refugees were, they would come into these camps out of Cambodia. And the way it was that, families, if you want to call it that, would show up. An uncle, a mom, a couple of kids, some cousins. There would be all these missing pieces. And they, again, this idea of home, this idea of love, love, regardless of how ragtag or busted up the family was, the idea of love coming together, the idea of home. They had left their home, but the idea of home, there was no way they could go back, but the idea, the desire of home, that place. And Jackkornfield said they would come into this one refugee camp he worked in, this desolate, dry place. And they were each given, whatever you want to call a family, they were given a hut, 4 feet by 6 feet, right? And out in front of the hut was 1 square yard of land they could do something with. And Jackkornfield said that, Cornfield was from America. He'd grown up in America, and he'd spent a lot of time in Asia and everything. But, he looks at this situation and just, wow, I don't see any way that love or family is going to happen here. But slowly over time, down the road about a mile was an open pit well. He said that these families would send someone down every day with a bucket to get some water and come back. And over time, what happened in front of these little huts were these beautiful little gardens. Squash and beans, and they would flower, and they would fruit, and they would come out. And he said suddenly the whole camp became alive. And the people were trading vegetables back and forth and supplementing what everyone was eating. You see, Jackkornfield, in talking about the idea of home, says, when we take the one seat, okay, what do we mean by the one seat? When we take the one seat, imagine the Buddha, that day he decided to take his seat under the Bodhi tree, to live in that presence, to stand for something, to sit for something, and say, this is my place. Cornfield says when we take the one seat, it could be our yoga mat, it could be our own monastery of our belief. He said that place in the midst of it all, that is our truth, our ideal, on this earth, the great force of life will begin to move through us. The great force of life will begin to move through us. Desire, intention, and then the great force of life moves through us. And I think the question that we have today, here in the 21st century, in 2013, I think that we all know at some level that we are being called upon today to create this place called home. We look at our families, we look at our communities, we look at some of our sub-communities, we look at our nation, we look at this world. Everyone talks now today about how there are things that are unsustainable. Unsustainable is a political and social buzzword. And so, if we are in that place, if we're like that child who is really desiring to be able to live in a home where love is, it's like us today saying to be able to live in a place that is sustainable. I mean, our very earth today is calling out in every way, shape, and form. Will you sustain me? Will you sustain me? Our banking systems, our family systems. I was talking to my oldest son the other day, or a while back, and he was sharing with me the idea that he is part of a generation in the way he looks at it. He said, every friend I had, everybody in my generation came from broken homes. Broken homes. And he and I had a conversation about what it's like to build something that's sustainable. That's one of the things that I do admire, and I've always admired about this center so much, because it is a community and a home that you all have built and sustained. And it takes prayer, it takes patience, it takes desire, it takes attention, but it also takes, like Nehemiah saying, you know what, the work I'm doing is too important for me to stop. The Cambodian refugee said, the work I'm doing is too important to stop. My daughter, who is my youngest child, she's in her 30s. In fact, today's her birthday. And she lives in Texas, and she was, along with her two brothers, came from the family, the early beginnings of our family. And she and I have had conversations about what it was like for her to grow up and looking around, and gee, I wish I lived there. About a year and a half ago, she lives in the Houston, Texas area, and so like a lot of people, our lives are all very busy, and we get caught up in things, and I don't see her as often as I want to, and I have 2 grandchildren. In fact, she's pregnant again, so there'll be a third. So anyway, I was down there about a year and a half ago, and she came and picked me up at the airport, and I remember some of the conversations we've had about what happened in our family and healing our family and the things that have gone on over the years and some of the challenges that remain in family and the conversations we've had about home. So she comes to pick me up at the airport, and so I go to her house. She's got this little house in a housing tract in the greater Houston area, and I come in, and the kids are going nuts, and they've got a zoo. They got cats and dogs and ferrets, and they got reptiles, and they got, I spent the night in their family room, and there were things running over the top of me, and it's like, just keep the lights off, and I love I love what was going on there. I was there for a few days, and the raucousness of this family. I mean, them just, my grandson's into Indiana Jones, and one morning I get up and he's like little Indiana Jones. He's got the hat on and the whip and the gun, and and as far as he's concerned, he's he's raiding some tomb or something, And my granddaughter, she's wearing a tutu with cowboy boots and sunglasses, and she's got a bag of some kind of potato chips that's bigger than she is, and she's just being her bad self, what I'm saying. And I love that. I loved it, and I was there for a couple days, and I saw what was going on in this home. And my daughter and I, we took the kids to a park one day, and we kind of played around. Then we were sitting on a bench, and they're running around, and we revisited that conversation. And I said to her, I am so proud of you because you did what it took to build the home you always wanted. Your children will not look around and say, I wonder what it would be like to live with them. And I told her how proud I was of her. And she said something to me. She said, well, it's just too important. It's just too important. Building home is really important. Another one of my favorite Buddhist writers, in fact, he's my official favorite spiritual writer, Lama Surya Das from the Tibetan tradition. He talks in one of his books about how a lot of people in spirituality are running to have an out-of-body experience. And Surya Das says, how about an in-body experience? I want you to think about that. How about an in-body, in the family, in this place experience? It's worth it. This is where we do the work of sustainability. This is where we do the work of love, is in our homes, in our bodies, in this experience. One of the reasons I was drawn to metaphysics, and especially New Thought, is the idea that there is a premium placed on this physical experience, where when I had grown up in other religions, they were always seemed to want to push me off into, somewhere to have that spiritual experience. It's right here, it's right now. It's in the 1 square yard piece of earth that someone, grew beans. It was Nehemiah on the wall. It's my daughter feeding the ferrets. It's there. And it's something that we go into with love. And I believe that our world, our communities, our smaller communities, our larger communities, our families are crying out to us to build home. to build home. I would appreciate if you join me in a consciousness of prayer. I am so grateful for the presence of Spirit, knowing that God is truly all there is. And what wells up within us as desire and moves forward in intention always goes to the next step of coming into manifestation. And I know and declare today that we are all so grateful for the homes that we are building in friendships, in family, in community, and in this planet. And today I am grateful to be standing in the midst of this spiritual home. And for that I am so grateful. And in my gratitude for all of this, I let my word go, knowing that it's so, and so it is. Namaste. Thank you very much.